welcome to Paolo De Capitani, who has organized this very interesting webinar, to all the participants, to all the speakers. This is a webinar with an international approach, with a comparative approach. I'm a professor of comparative law, but I'm not a professor of tax law, so I can only say that it's of high interest, and I listen to it very attentively. It's about windfall profit taxation, especially in the energy sector, but the issues that will be discussed here, it is very probable that will widespread in different industries. This is an initiative, very interesting initiative of the Tax Commission of ICC Italia, and Paolo De Capitani is the chair of the ICC Italia Tax Commission, and together with him, the initiative is now organized, and they will take part to it, and thanks to Alessandro Bucchieri from Enel, that is an international ICC Italia delegate, and it's with us also Stefani Carmini of the Tax Commission, member of the Tax Commission too. And a warm welcome also to the other speakers that will bring us their witness about their different jurisdiction, the approach in their jurisdiction to this issue. And so thank you to Stefan Chaselup, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, I don't know exactly what it is, Maria Munoz Viejo, and Andrew Thompson. Thank you for being here with us to bring your experience to this webinar. And I can only say that this is an initiative of, as I have already said, of the Tax Commission, and we can give a welcome to a new member in the Tax Commission, to Giuseppe Zorzi. So I can say this, so welcome to this new member. Now I don't steal other time to the webinar, and so Paolo, I give the floor to you and to the other speaker. You are the moderator, so you can conduct all the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor De Donno, and thank you for all the participants, speakers, and non-speakers. Given the nature of this webinar, given we already had a first version back in October, we thought it would be useful and very interesting indeed, given the updates that we are experiencing, to organize a second part of that webinar, extending our analysis to the comparative issues. And why that? That was because during the course of 2022, we saw many countries, various countries, taking different paths to excess profit taxation in order to face the energy crisis. And over the course of the spring and summer, we actually saw different countries, even within the EU, taking a very different approach to the topic, which finally led the European Union to intervene in October. It's exactly when we held that very first seminar, very first webinar on the topic, with Regulation 1854, which will be analyzed through the speeches in particular of Mr. Bucchieri, Head of Tax at Enel, which I once again welcome for his intervention. I am also very happy to have with us, beside the most prominent speakers we could hope to guest, also very prominent participants. I have seen Mr. Bigoni already online with us from the Eni group. So welcome to Mr. Bigoni, welcome Alberto Pluviano and everybody. And please feel free to intervene and put your questions as soon as they come up to your mind, because this is meant to be a dialogue, a discussion on the pretty important topics we will enter into. We knew already back in October 2022 that those taxes, the various ones that we experienced, would face a high rate of litigation. That is true for both the Italian extraordinary levies, the Article 37, which goes under the name of tax on super profits. I'm pretty skeptical it really targets super profits, as I will explain further down below. And Article 15 bis, which is the object of the intervention of Mr. Carmini, founding partner of Studio Carmini. And we have seen this litigation spread through administrative courts, tax courts, constitutional court in Italy, at least for the moment, and we will listen what our Spanish, French, and UK speakers will tell us about their own countries. And the ECJ as well, because not only were companies presenting claims against the national measures, some of them, one of the biggest ones in the world was the first one in the Netherlands, brought up the case before the ECJ, challenging the use of Article 122 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union as a tool to introduce new levies, although in the face of the energy crisis, as the letter of Article 122 actually hints to. So taxes are never popular, but you know, it is said that they are never more popular than during wars or crises, and 2022 was the proof of that. In fact, Italy, I guess, together with Spain and Ms. Munoz from the Endesa group, will better explain that. On the Spanish case, because Spain maybe was even a forecomer, even before Italy actually took its own measures, and with a subjective scope which is actually wider than the Italian one, even wider than the Italian one. Well, Italy was nonetheless among the first countries to intervene through the adoption of Article 15 bis, which is a cap and floor mechanism by which the excess in prices of energy is recaptured or refinanced to the companies, most often, obviously, in these market conditions, recaptured. And Article 37, which is said to be, as I just mentioned, the Italian tax on super profits, at least the first version, because we then also introduced a second one through the budget law in December 2022 in order to implement a EU-inspired excess profit tax. EU-inspired because, as Mr. Bucchieri will tell us, there are some features that depart from the model of the European Union. Well, the 2022 Italian excess profit tax was actually designed on the VAT settlements. And this is most evidently due to the urgency the government had to raise revenue in order to face the crisis, and in particular to finance some measures to the weakest end users, both households and energy consuming businesses. So cash was needed, and the VAT settlements apparently were, arguably, allegedly were, the most readily available instrument to measure the ability to pay of taxpayers. This is the cornerstone and the focus of the constitutional litigation that will take place before the Italian Constitutional Court, because if the tax is to be seen as a tax on super profits, then the VAT settlements, as we already discussed in the previous edition of the webinar, and as I also wrote in an article which is forthcoming on Intertax, then, as the Italian commentators and the claimants argue, the tax actually may fall short of its target. It may not do what it actually sought to do, and thereby it would prove inconsistent, and based on the previous constitutional case law, and mainly the case of the Robin Hood tax that is the kind of precedent of an extraordinary tax on the energy sector in Italy, and then prove unconstitutional, if that is the parameter, the benchmark for judgment. If the judgment otherwise is different, and it is the accrual of cash by companies in a very short time frame, and the need for the government to move that cash from those who could better afford the energy crisis, big companies experiencing an increase in their VAT settlements, for how crude and how, and how, let me say, poorly drafted gauge that could be, then the judgment may finally turn out not to be that clear. At least it is not sure. I'm not sure the outcome at the Constitutional Court could be already sealed. There may be some other features, more limited ones, that may more likely be in crisis before the Constitutional Court, and the one that stands tall among the others is the denial of deductibility of the 2022 tax from the corporate income tax and from the following year from the EU-inspired excess profit tax, perhaps. So this is the main introduction, the large view on this topic, and we will see what the other countries also have done, how they drafted and designed the subjective scope of application of these taxes, whether they took account of derivatives and the possibility to shift the profits to other sectors, banking and financial sector in the first place, what the territoriality of application of the tax was and is in the other countries, what the relation with other levies, the corporate income tax mainly, is the excess profit tax deductible, is it not? What the time frame for application is the tax retroactive as it somehow is in Italy, because the base period for application of the 2022 tax is backward-looking, and there are so many features in an excess profit tax that pop up and may trigger issues, problems, complaints, and one more is the treatment of losses. Are you taking account of losses companies incurred before entering the scope of application of this tax, or are you just taking the profits in a very specific moment when companies, yes, were accruing profits, but maybe after taking losses in the pandemic, for example, because one of the other issues is that the benchmark period, the base period, is compared to the pandemic period in Italy, which is also at the basis of one of the claims brought before the Constitutional Court. So I would stop here for the intervention, and I reserve the right to put demands and dialogue with you. I would now leave the floor to the second intervention, which is by Mr. Bucchieri, Head of Tax Affairs at Enel, who will be speaking about the implementation in Italy of the extraordinary contribution inspired at the EU regulation. Thank you, Alessandro, for being with us.
Thanks, Paolo, for the very nice introduction. I will try now to share my, let's see, okay. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We can.
Very good. Fantastic. I'm really impressed every time that that works. So I will briefly go and giving an overview of what the Italian rules, which one was, as you said, referred to 2022, and the another one on 2023. And I will specifically focus from some critical operational aspects that we were facing as a utility. So going to the first measure, we have the law 21/2022, what we call the extraordinary contribution for 2022. And the scope was mainly, let's say the perimeter was on producers, importers, sellers of electricity, gas, petroleum products that realized those windfall gains as in the energy sector. The contribution was 25%. The contribution was based on an increase, was equal to 25% on increase of VAT balance measured comparing two periods, the 9 months from October 21 to April 22. Compared with the October 20, April 21. So I hear someone also, maybe if everybody can mute. Okay, thanks. So it was a very strange base because first was having a period which was let's say taking 21 and 22, so it was just covering not a full year but 9 months on 2 years. So what was the reaction of many companies, as you anticipated? Well, most of the companies were just paying the levy and started. They asked for a refund, and some of them, of course, receiving a denial from the tax authority, started a litigation. Now we will come back to this because, of course, we start having some news on this litigation started. The second measure was the law 197/22, the solidarity contribution for 2023, and as you said, Paolo, this was inspired by the EU regulation, but it was somehow a bit, it was just inspired, not exactly, as you said, the same, and specifically the taxable basis was the excess, the 10% exceeding the increase on average taxable income, comparing the year 22 with the 3 years 18-21, which is of course different from the EU regulation, which was providing 20% increase, so the excess part of 20% increase. Then the rate was 50% instead of 33% provided by the EU regulation. And it was also introduced a kind of cap on the equity. So the tax base and so it was capped to 25% of the equity at year end 21. And the contribution was, of course, not deductible from corporate income tax. So for our IRES and IRAP. So what are the let's say critical aspects of both extraordinary contribution 22 and 23? For 22, of course, is the specific economic sector which let's say which was reserved, and so probably it might be a point of let's say to use in a potential litigation. The methodology of calculation that probably is not able to really identify extra profits. No, it was based on simply the balance of VAT, which is not depending much on your real profit. As Paolo was mentioning, the period subject to comparison was some pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, so which are not, let's say, not comparable from an economic standpoint, and also the retroactivity is a point that again you, Paolo, touched before. Going quickly to the critical aspects of Solidarity Contribution 2023. One point, at least for us, for the electricity business, is that the EU regulation was excluding the electricity business because it was already somehow hit by the a price cap on electricity prices, and instead the Italian law was including also us, so the electricity sector. And one point which was in the for us really critical one from an operational standpoint was that as you can imagine, we are an integrated company, so we are producing, distributing, and selling energy. And specifically for us, we were having, let's say, losses, or we were not having, let's say, extra profits compared to the 3 years before in the marketing business. We were even, as I said, having a loss, and we were having profits on the production side. So if you look at the integrated business, we were basically not having any extra profit. But if you look separately to one piece of the business with respect to other one, we were having from one side losses, and from the other side, let's say, extra profit based on the definition of the law. And this is a kind of paradox. So we were paying quite an important and material amount of taxes, even if you look at the business in an integrated way. We were not having any substantial extra profit. So I wanted to highlight specifically this. One last point, which might be interesting, is that one feature of the Italian law was, let's say, capping, in any case, the contribution at 25% of the equity. Then, a lot of question about what kind of equity we should take into account to measure this cap. And there is a very recent ruling that the Italian tax authority issued in June that specified that the equity should not include the reserve of cash flow hedging, which in our case were very relevant. You know, you may imagine that, especially in this context, the derivatives that you use to hedge your position and which are going as a result into directly into the equity were really material for us. So it was very important, this ruling specifying that part of the equity should be excluded from the calculation. So I went very quickly, and just to give time to the others and also to make comparison with other contexts, and maybe we can have, let's say, a discussion later on.
Alessandro, you in fact testified what the first and biggest issue with an excess profit tax results, which is measuring the excess. What is excess? Is it the excess over an average base period of the previous years? Is that an excess over a normal rate of return of the investment? How do you measure, how do you calculate, and especially so when you do that in a hurry because of the crisis you have to face, which you know, brings in Italy we have this motto that la gattina che fai, la gatta che fa I gattini ciechi, no? La fretta fa I gattini ciechi. So Stefano, the mic is yours. Tell us about the developments. We have seen pretty few over Article 15 bis and the cap and floor mechanism.
Thank you, Paolo, and thank you, everybody. It's always a pleasure to share with you opinion and experience in this occasion. I have to talk in 15 minutes about this stepbrother of the tax that you were mentioning before. Last September, we were just to pay the first installment regarding this mechanism, because Italian law call it a mechanism, so not a tax and not a contribution, a mechanism. A mechanism that provided to take into consideration fixed legal prices, fixed by law, depending by the different zone, comprised between 56 and 75 euro per megawatt hour. In respect of the price of the electric energy fed into the grid from the 1st of February 2022 to 31st December 2022, and produced by alternative sources, mainly photovoltaic, solar, hydroelectrical, geothermal, and so on. If the capacity of this this producer exceeds 20 kilowatt hour, 20 kilowatts, sorry. So in a nutshell, the Italian law provided that this mechanism was also applicable in respect of agreement signed between before the 27 January 2022, which is the day in which the decree law number 4 came into force, and the discipline was attributed to ARERA, the regulatory authority, Italian regulatory authority for energy, grid, and environment, that issued its deliberation in June 2022 after a consultation during which several remarks were raised. In particular, lack of discipline with reference to intergroup transaction, misalignment with the toolbox Repower EU, that was the document coming from the EU at that date known. In particular, with reference to the necessity to avoid the distortion of the market, the necessity not to discourage investment in renewable energy, which may be the case, and also with reference to the transfer of the benefit back to the final user as the aim of the legal mechanism to be put in place. Another remark was about the double taxation with reference to the tax that you were commenting before, Article 37. And other remark was about the inadequacy of the discipline with reference to the power plant upgrading, on-site exchanges, and storage system. All this remark was not properly considered by ARERA, and so ARERA issued its rule, and then later on the law decree 155 of 2022 extended to 30 June 2023 the application of this mechanism. We provide this comparison between legal prices different by zone and the contract price, even if negotiated before January 2022, if higher than the 10% of the one fixed by law. It's important, in my opinion, also to mention that the law decree 144 modified the destination of the fund, because originally it was destinated to the final to a fund that of the market in order to compensate the final users, but at the end this last decree modified the destination, providing the transfer to the state bill, state budget. So even the destination was not the original one. In October 2022 arrived and came into force the EU regulation number 1854, which introduced the price cap of 180 euro per megawatt hour. For all the more or less all the renewable sources, because all was included, wind, solar, geothermal, as you know. this EU regulation provided also the possibility for the state law to provide a further limit to the producer, and also higher price cap if it has to be considered in order to cover the investment that may justify higher price cap. It's very important to underline that the EU regulation provided that all the measures put in place should have to be proportionate, not discriminatory. They do not have to compromise investment flow. They must cover investment and operating costs. They not generate a distortion in the wholesale energy market. And of course, be compatible with the general principle, general view, EU law. Italy introduced accordingly another compensation mechanism, this time only one-way mechanism, applicable to the energy fed into the grid, not covered by the double compensation mechanism. So in Italy we have at this stage two different mechanisms, both in place until the energy fed into the grid until the 30 June 2023. One is the two-way mechanism, which implies the comparison that I mentioned before, and the one-way compensation mechanism, which is the implementation of the EU law. Even in this case, ARERA was involved in the discipline, and GSA was the authority who had to calculate for both the two mechanisms if there is something that the producer must pay or must receive in case of the two-way mechanism. One thing that is important to say, I think, from a technical point of view in Italy, is that GSA apply VAT, the VAT on the payment required. In my opinion, it is not. So it may be disputable because this is not a price adjustment. This is something that you have to pay because there is a law that obliges you to do it. But anyway, VAT is applied by GSA on the money that he is asking. The one-way mechanism is more sophisticated in terms of the intragroup transaction, because it is excluded by the application, and provided that for the energy fed into the grid by energy communities are not included in the scope. What happened with reference to the one-way mechanism? As far as I know, because of the price now applicable on the market, it is not really a topic, because the price cap is higher than the one on the market. The two-way mechanism is a great problem in Italy, because a number of litigation are pending, and today, also reading the newspaper, you probably are aware of new evolution of this litigation. In extremely briefly, the deliberation of ARERA was appealed before the administrative court of Lombardy, with mainly for three reasons. One is contrary to the EU law. and this reason was rejected by the regional court because the interpretation of the regional court of this mechanism is that it should not be applicable on revenues, but on extra profits. With this interpretation, the law could be in line with EU law. On the same basis, also the critical with reference to the compatibility to the constitutional rule was rejected. But at the end, the regional court upheld the appeal with reference to the illegitimacy of the resolution of ARERA, because ARERA didn't actually motivated and assessed all the items that should have been considered in order to calculate the actual inframarginal profit, which is the only way that may make the mechanism compatible with the Italian and European law in the interpretation of the regional court. So the deliberation of ARERA was declared illegitimate, not valid. But ARERA appealed in front of the State Council, which briefly suspended the enforceability of the regional court, mainly because being the double compensation mechanism a temporary measure, if the ruling of the regional court were put in place, the scope of the law would be nullified, and so State Council preferred to suspend the enforceability of the ruling of the regional court, saying that also the periculum in mora was pending, was more in terms of damage that may be provided to the state in respect of the damage that may be suffered by the producer of energy in case of a payment with a payback at the end in case of successful of their appeal. State Council confirmed its decision also in a second time, saying more or less the same thing, and also saying that there is also, in its opinion, a fumus boni iuris with reference to the reason of appeal right by ARERA, but specifying that his preliminary judgment is not on the compatibility with the EU law, because at that stage, with reference to the double compensation mechanism, the EU law was not in place. There was only the EU repower communication, and so this is not the part of the judgment for which State Council had to be issue its decision. Recently, we also know that the regional court of Lombardy adjourned the case in front to ECG because the legal price is fixed by the law, seems to be not in line with the price cap regulation that was fixed by the European legislator. One thing the last thing that I think is useful to mention to you is that in all this case has been confirmed what I underlined in last year, that we are not talking about a tax. We are not talking about a tax. We are talking about an undertaking that is put in place by law, but the competence is of a different judge if a litigation may have to be raised. I think I'm in time. I hope to be in time, and so I pass to you.
Thank you, Stefano. It is curious, though, although not considering it a tax, the administrative court in Lombardy actually blames the implementing authority, the implementing decree, for not properly targeting super profits, right? So this is pretty curious to me.
Yes, it's good.
Okay, thank you very much for your extensive intervention on such an articulated topic. So according to the program, we should now leave the floor to Mr. Chasselou. Stefan? We lost.
He said he was going to be late, and it was possible.
Oh yes, right. He's not with us yet. Yes. Okay. So sorry. Yeah. Right. So well, the second in line is then Maria Muñoz Viejo.
Yes.
with the Spanish approach, a pretty interesting one, and the very first one, indeed, according to what I read. And pretty extensive, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Yes, very well.
Okay, and you can see the presentation because I have
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's go.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation to this webinar. It's a good opportunity to share our pains with these new levies in all the countries. So I just wanted to, first of all, to explain what is happening here in Spain. No? As we have had the opportunity to see in the previous intervention, the European regulation has established certain measures by way of limitation on revenues for the electricity sector, and meanwhile, a specific temporary solidarity contribution has been introduced for all the oil and gas sector. Okay, in the Spanish case, at the date of approval of the European regulation, the government has already established from last quarter 21 this limit on revenues, and not only on those above 180 euros megawatt hour, but being even more restrictive on those that exceed 67 euros megawatt hour. Okay. Additionally, they already had in Parliament from July 22 a proposal for allow aim at the introduction of new levy that not only affected to the oil and gas sector, but also to the electricity sector. And that instead of taxing the excess of extraordinary profits, as is defined by European regulation, it was taxing the gross incomes, gross revenues obtained in 2022 and 2023 by relevant entities in this sector. Despite the Spanish government, despite the approval of the European regulation, decided to go ahead with its measures as they were already designed. Understanding that their measures were equivalent to those proposed from Europe. So basically, as you can see here, in the media. This made a lot of noise, not only in the media but also in the public opinion. Why? Because these levies are affecting to more sectors than those suggested by the European regulation, including financial sector and electricity sector. Also because they have been processed through an extraordinary procedure, avoiding formal opinion from the Council of State and an open debate in its parliamentary processing. Also because they have a significant quantitative impact on the benefits of the affected entities, and also because they have been requested at a time of record collection of taxes in Spain due to the inflation situation, and also due to the nature of tax of these levies instead of non-tax levies. Okay, so these measures have been very have had a lot of controversy. So going into deep of about these levies, the law creates two new levies, one for financial institutions, another for companies in the energy sector. They are considered as non-tax levies of a public nature, is what we call in Spain prestación patrimonial de carácter público no tributario. This has been a tool that has used the government in order to avoid the application of constitutional principles applicable to taxes, but not to other types of charges. The revenues will be used to fund measures determined by the law, but with a vague and indefinite explanation. The payment obligation arises on January the 1st of each year, with an advance payment in February equal to the 50% of its total amount, and a final assessment is on in September. Levies cannot be deductible expenses for corporate income tax purposes. Levies cannot be passed directly or indirectly to customers. And despite not being a tax, the penalty regime is the one of the general taxation law, and the competence of management and review has been given to the state tax agency. The taxpayers are basically the main operators of energy sector. However, you can exclude those where their net revenues are below 1 billion euros in 2019, and or the case where their net revenues from 2017 to 2019 obtained from the activity determining their consideration as principal operator did not exceed 50% of their total net revenues in the year concerned. What else? Okay, the levy to be paid, in fact, is equal to 1.2% of net revenues from the activity carried on in Spain in the previous year, with the following consideration. It must be included the total amount of net revenues of the tax consolidation group to which the company, the main operator of electricity market, belongs to, even though the group can have companies that do not carry out activity related to energy. Okay, and it must be excluded specific amounts relating to regulated activities. For example, in our case, the part of the voluntary price for the small consumers for electricity, or the regulated revenues of electricity and natural gas transmission and distribution networks. So these kind of revenues can be excluded. To show what this tax represents in terms of taxing profits, for Endesa, for example, it implies a 72% increase in corporate tax paid on profits for 2022. What's happening now? This is the legal dispute of energy sector against the rule. As soon as the order regulating the statement model of the levy was approved, the legal battle against the levy began. As you can see, the media have also been very attentive to each step in this process. Which are the main topics of discussion against the rule? On one hand, we have the evaluation of the European rules in several of its aspects. We think that the Spanish levy is contrary to the Council Regulation 2022/1854, as the scope of the Spanish levy differs from the temporary solidarity contribution, as we have explained before. Also, the Spanish levy constitutes an illegal state aid to the extent that the Spanish government has not notified its approval to the European Commission, and the tax constitutes an asymmetrical tax prohibited by Article 107 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. And finally, the Spanish levy is contrary to the requirement of non-discrimination between operators in the electricity sector, okay, according to the Electricity Sectorial Directive. Also, we think that this levy is unconstitutional because we have the violation of the constitutional guarantees that should have been respected in the parliamentary process to pass this law. We have the violation of the principle of legal certainty. It affects to consolidated factual situation prior to its entry into force, okay, the years previous. And the levy, we think that is a tax. So it violates the principle of generality, economic capacity, equality, progressivity, and non-confiscatory nature of that are included in the Constitution, and also the one related to the equality. And the last point is the violation of the principle of reserve of law. The ministerial order that regulates the levy models incurs in abuse of illegality for having established a fair liquidation regime that was not provided in the previous law. And finally, I'm trying to show here what next. As you know, next Sunday there are general elections in Spain, and the two main political groups have expressed contrary intention in relation to these levies. The right political party wants to adapt levy to European regulation as soon as possible, and the left political party, currently in power, wants to extend the current levy to 2025 and following. So now we have to wait and see what happens in the future, and of course how the legal disputes evolve in this matter. So, but basically, I think that's all.
Thank you, Maria. That was very interesting indeed, and the proof that the comparative analysis is so useful because, I mean, obviously Spain and Italy have very similar traditions and legal systems, but you know, reviewing the list of legal issues you were just presenting, you know, I could mirror them on the Italian side because we are experiencing claims of violation of the state aid rules as well. Many claimants actually complain about being included, whereas other business sectors were not. In Italy, we do not have, as of today, extended the application of the tax to the financial sector. The pharmaceuticals that during the pandemic experienced incredible and unprecedented profits were not hit. And, you know, for example, we just experienced a few weeks ago another administrative court, the one in Milan, if I'm not wrong, which referred the case of the sugar tax to the Constitutional Court based on the fact that the claimants, beverage companies, were complaining about being included into this very tailored and specific tax, while sugar-rich foods was not included in such a, you know, Pigouvian levy. and in the case is to be decided by the Constitutional Court in the next few months. And also about the retroactivity, as I very briefly mentioned in the opening intervention, we also have this issue. I have to say, regarding the 2022 tax, the base period is the 7 months, before the introduction of the tax. Actually, the tax was introduced in March, and the base period goes from October to April. So for 1 month, it is forward-looking, if you can call 1 month forward-looking. And for the rest of the base period, it is backward-looking. And, for 6/7, it is therefore retroactive, the Italian levy. And this has raised questions about the violation of the principle, the constitutional principle, protecting from the introduction of retroactive taxes. However, I have to say that the constitutional case law in these cases is not that detailed. We do have some precedents, but what the main principle in Italian constitutional case law is that the ability to pay must be still current. And when I'm saying still, I mean that in a previous case, the tax that was decided was considered unconstitutional because it was backward looking for a time frame of 10 years. There was a real estate tax, a very particular one. In this case, given the emergency, given we are only looking at 7 months and those 7 months were not yet ended when the tax was introduced, I'm not sure about the outcome. The question will certainly be discussed, but it is debatable. It is debatable. I mean, it is retroactive, of course, but is that retroactive enough to be considered unconstitutional? In the precedents that I read, I could not find a clear-cut solution. So thank you very much. That was very interesting.
Thank you.
And Andrew, what about a former EU member?
Hi. Just trying to set my camera up. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Paolo, for inviting me. And I will share my slides, which are here. Okay. Okay. So yes, we are, as you say, a former member, which means that we are not constrained in quite the same way about what we can do. I thought I'd start off actually with a quick look at what windfall taxes we've had in the UK in the past, just for reference. So we had a First World War excess profits duty, which was charged on profits over a pre-war baseline. So very much like some of the current taxes that have been introduced at various different rates depending on the different period. That was in part retrospective. It was introduced in 1915 but applied back to 1914. And we had a very similar tax in the Second World War, again at different rates, going up to 100% in fact, although that was always subject to a 20% rebate after the war was over. One interesting point to note on these is that although they were very specific in terms of the time frame that they were applying to, it was about 15 years in each case before all the litigation on what all the provisions meant had finished. And I think they were even collecting excess profits duty from sort of 1921 and earlier years in 1936. So for all that these were supposedly quite narrowly focused temporary taxes, they had a long tail in terms of obligations. So those were our wartime taxes. And then in 1981, when interest rates went up, but bank deposits were still paying 0 interest, and this had been a phenomenon that started, I think, at the end of 1979. So the new Conservative government, which was desperately seeking money to balance the books, introduced a retrospective tax on bank deposits at 2.5%, to the extent that the bank concerned had over 10 million. So that was retrospective. That was thought to raise about £400 million. And finally, in 1997, when the new Labour government came in, they had said in years running up to that they objected to the terms on which Conservative governments had privatised various utilities. They thought that the government had not got sufficient value for the taxpayer. So they charged a windfall tax on privatised utilities. And they did that using a somewhat complicated formula. They worked out, obviously relatively easily, what the flotation value was based on the prices quoted on the stock exchange. And then they looked at what a notional value would be based on a measure of 9 times post-tax profits over a 4-year period. And that was generally a 4-year period, I think, before flotation, though not in all cases. Actually, no, sorry. I think it was after flotation, except when that was too recent, and it was going to hit 1997. So then it was 4 years up to 1997. So that had been widely trailed, and that again was retrospective. So that's our British history of windfall taxes. 2 sort of very different styles of windfall tax there. The ones during the wars on the excess profits, and these other 2 on specific industries. So then we come to the new levies that we introduced in 2022, and the government was really very reluctant to introduce these, and we were certainly slower than Spain and Italy to do so. The first discussion really was in sort of February, so this was even before the war in Ukraine started. The opposition proposed a 10% increase on profits tax on North Sea oil and gas, and the government said no, because by that stage already the prices had been creeping up and the companies were making increased profits. And the government sort of kept to that line really until April, when it started hinting that it might be changing its mind, as I think oil and gas prices had continued to go up. And then in May, with very little advance notice, the government announced an energy profits levy at the time of the spring budget. I'll come on to the details of that on the next slide, and also how it changed. But I guess one point to note is that the reasons the government gave for not introducing this were that the situation was still very uncertain, and it did not want to discourage investment. And although I believe economists would tell you that a retrospective tax is marvelous because nobody can avoid it, because they didn't know how they were going to avoid it, because they didn't know it was coming. And if you manage to legislate the perfect retrospective tax that's completely unpredicted, but at the same time manage to convince everybody that it will never be repeated, you don't put off investment at all. But back in the real world, the UK government was very concerned about putting off investment and about giving people the impression that the UK was an unstable and unpredictable country for investment, particularly, obviously, since Brexit. There is extra reason to fear that people might think that the UK's regime might be unstable. So there was a great concern to avoid that. And that also fed into the nature of the levy and deductions from it, but I'll come to that. Then at the same time, the government also said it was looking at appropriate steps for a tax on electricity generators, and one of the concerns there was the position of some generators who had essentially sold ahead using contracts for difference, so derivative contracts, and how this would apply to them, and also the position on electricity was moving a lot more quickly than that for oil and gas. In June, the government was said to be cooling on the idea of a tax on electricity generators, and then, as I'm sure you'll recall, we had, in spite of having no elections, we had a lot of governmental changes. So we lost Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister. We lost Rishi Sunak as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. For a brief period, we had Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, and they said that they were against a windfall tax. And then they, at one point, announced that they were going to introduce a cost plus revenue limit, which they said very firmly was not a tax. And then they left office. And in November, we had the announcement of an electricity generator levy under Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister and our new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. So what are these taxes? Oh, and sorry, some changes to the energy profits levy as well, including a rate increase. So the oil and gas profits levy is a tax on profits. It's not on revenues, just profits. As you'll see further down the table, that there's no threshold below which the additional tax does not apply. The tax is essentially built on our existing regime for the taxation of North Sea oil and gas. So a lot of the calculation is just based on that, although it's a separate tax. One difference is that financing and decommissioning costs are disallowed. So you can't borrow lots of money from a bank and then say that the bank's making that profit and it's outside the scope. I'm not sure why decommissioning costs were disallowed. That hasn't ever been something I understood. And there was also this huge allowance for investment. So this was put in place by the government with a view to saying that we are not discouraging investment in the North Sea, and if you invest, it was suggested initially that you would effectively actually get a 91% rebate given the size of the various taxes and the size of the various allowances. That was one of the things that they changed in November 2022 for periods from 2023 and afterwards. As I said, the rate was increased, so it was a 25% rate in 2022 and 35% thereafter, on top of the existing 40% rate. But the point was made that this takes us almost to the 78% rate that Norway charges. So it's not actually hugely out of line with everywhere else. It's not deductible from corporation tax, which is unsurprising because it's a tax on profit itself. It was originally going to be from the 26th of May 2022 when it was announced, so no retroactivity. They were very keen not to be retroactive until when oil and gas prices returned to historically more normal levels, or the end of December, I think 2025, whichever was earlier. That was then extended in November until 2028, and the idea of it being removed when prices returned to more normal levels was also removed. The figure I've given there for the expected tax take was when this was initially announced. It's been reevaluated downwards since. The electricity generator levy is a somewhat different beast. So instead of being charged on profits, it's charged on gross receipts. Interestingly, perhaps in comparison with the EU levy, it's from generating electricity in the UK, not from delivering electricity into the UK. It applies to nuclear, renewables, biomass, but not pumped storage, battery storage, coal or oil. Electricity generated under a contract for difference, as I mentioned, is excluded. And there is a deduction for costs of buying back electricity in the market. The rate is 45%, and this is, as I said, a rate on gross receipts, but there is a threshold of £75 per megawatt hour, which will go up with indexation. And so one would hope that generally that is sufficient to cover costs. So it probably is effectively the same as a tax on profits. There is a 10 million allowance and a 50 gigawatt hour per year threshold that was reduced from 100 gigawatt hours when they realized that there could be companies that would be over the 10 million allowance, but sort of around the 100 gigawatt mark, and they didn't want to create incentives to behave in odd ways and not produce in order to stay outside the tax. This too is not deductible from corporate income tax, and it has a very similar end date of 31st March 2028. And again, it wasn't retrospective. It was announced in November to come in from the 1st of January. And the initial expected take was £14 billion. Again, that has been reduced as a result of subsequent events. Reactions and recent developments. I suppose things that are not going to be on this slide. One is litigation. So far as I'm aware, no one has challenged this in the UK. Obviously, we don't have supremacy of EU law for people to argue, and as I'm sure you know, our constitution is unwritten and vague, and so not really a source of arguments for challenging taxes. Some said the tax should have been bigger and it should have been retrospective, because there isn't really a constitutional bar to doing that, just a view of what's in the UK's interest in terms of being welcoming to investment. Oil and gas majors obviously said it would make them reconsider investments, but in fact, I think there have been very few actual announcements of things that people are not doing concretely as a result of these taxes coming in. One of the oddities of the Total announcement that it was reducing investments in the North Sea is, well, I suppose two oddities. One, it was suggested that it was quite odd to include this extensive investment allowance because the life cycle for the investment cycle was so long that people wouldn't really be making decisions about how to invest next year as a result of these changes. And obviously, if there are huge allowances, that would be a reason to invest more rather than less. But Total said it was going to be investing less in the North Sea because of the uncertainties. Harbour Energy announced job cuts in January. And then in June, the UK did announce a price floor. So if the oil and gas prices go below certain levels for 2 consecutive quarters, then the levy will not apply. And that's it on the UK side. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. We will see whether the expected take will finally turn out to be correct, which is not very often the case in my country.
I'm sure here it won't be either.
The digital service tax, for example, and the 2022 levy as well. I mean, at least at the beginning, we were expecting, I believe, 8 billion to be paid in within August, which finally turned out not to be the case because many refused to make the payments because they were afraid after doing that the Constitutional Court would do what it did regarding the previous Robin Hood tax when it declared the unconstitutionality, but only prospectively, so without recognizing the refund they were claiming. So thank you very much. And Stéphane joined us. So let's hear about the French case. Thank you, Stéphane, for being with us. Very, very happy to have you with us. You're on mute, though. You're still on mute. We cannot hear you, Stéphane.
Normally, you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Sorry for that.
Welcome.
I would share my screen. Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
We do not
because
hear you very well. Yeah, try it again.
you hear
The line is weak. Perhaps you may want to change device.
okay. Okay, maybe the line is better then.
Go on.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Not too bad?
Yes. Okay. That is wonderful.
Okay. So we are because the regime of the taxes we are discussing about is clearly onto the franchise a true mix between the tax aspects and the energy code, energy field aspects. So it is the same into the company energy French place, emphasize that at the beginning. It has been very difficult to find the right people.
No, Stefan, I'm so sorry. Just try and change device maybe because the line is weak. Also with the imaging so that we see. No. Try and disconnect and re-enter the meeting.
It's something very around taxation and let's say budget revenue more than let's say a political stuff. That's why it has been many discussion around the rate of taxation.
Let's wait a few seconds to see whether Stefan can fix his troubles with the line. And in the meantime, if any one of the participants has questions, comments on the previous speeches, please come forward. it struck me how the UK is not experiencing litigation. It must be something in the veins of the Latin people. Because really, we are seeing cases popping up every day, from administrative courts to tax courts, referrals to the Constitutional Court, to the ECJ. You know, they're pretty heavy levies, so we can quite understand that. So I'm surprised about what you said.
I think it's two things. I think it's our lack of constitution, and certainly for the oil and gas levy, the fact that it's built on an existing tax regime. So it's not really a huge change, and there have been changes to the rates before. So back in 2011, when the oil price was going up, George Osborne increased the rate of the tax on North Sea oil, and also introduced some measures to lower the tax on fuel for cars, so sort of offsetting the increase for consumers using the same money. And you know that there were complaints, and people said, you know, the North Sea won't be worth investing in if you're going to change the tax rules all the time. But it was very much a sort of political challenge rather than a legal challenge.
Yeah, so the UK left the Union for, among others, not being subject to the state aid rules, and it finally turns out for the oil companies that is a side effect. They cannot claim a violation of state aid rules, as the other ones are doing here.
Well, that's actually an interesting point, because the withdrawal agreement, or the cooperation agreement, does include state aid provisions, but I'm not aware that anyone has tried to make that argument. Possibly again because it's you know, we've had the North Sea regime for years and years, and it is very much a sort of an addition onto that rather than some new tax that applies to various different sectors in an unpredictable fashion.
Yeah.
So sorry, I am Stefan speaking. I'm so sorry. I have a big bug with my laptop. I'm trying to connect in the meanwhile onto my laptop. I don't know how you want me to present with Delphine the thing. Maybe we could try by phone the time for the laptop to reboot himself.
Yes, we can hear you very well right now. If you want to send me your presentation via email, I can share it on your behalf and follow your discussion.
Okay, wonderful. So sorry very much. Sorry so much for that.
Don't worry.
So what I said just before the presentation, I think you have lost me as soon as I spoke. So let's say that at the very beginning, as an introduction, and I would like to compare the French system with the one of my previous colleagues regarding the other countries. It is less political than taxation onto the French market. It has been very managed by the tax administration, and it has been discussed a lot with the Direction de la législation fiscale. Indeed, it was one guy, Mathieu de Coninck, who dealt with all the questions of the companies in France. And just for you to have a view on the stabilization we could expect from this regime, we have more than 200 questions a week for the Direction de la législation fiscale about that two taxes or that two contributions. So it is something very relevant for us and for you to understand that onto the French market, we have many questions remaining on that two contribution regarding the calculation. Let's say we have a very recent decree at the end of June we would focus on, but as an introduction, it is important to focus on that it is not the end of the discussion. And we would also have a discussion at the end of this contribution. We have some disputes and some discussion before the court regarding the windfall tax. So that's why in this short presentation, we would propose to you, we would discuss about obviously the two contribution, but also on the future of that and the way the French company are doing the thing, because on the 25th of July, we would have to pay the first time the contribution for electricity. So what we could say, I think we can go directly to slide 4 because we don't have much time remaining. That we have many parliamentary debate on these two contributions, and it has been a long way to have this discussion. And today, onto the calculation, just to provide you as an example, we have some very close discussion with company about the way of calculate the charges, because we would come back on that. To calculate the tax and the contribution, we have to compare obviously the revenues, the profits, and the taxes and the charges we would have regarding that contribution. Maybe, Delphine, you could begin with the temporary solidarity contribution.
Do you have received the slide, Paolo?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sharing them. Can you see them?
No, we are only on iPhone, so by phone.
Okay, sorry, but we can. I can guarantee you.
So we have the temporary solidarity contributions that has been voted as part of the French financial bill for 2033. So this temporary solidarity contribution is applicable to all French companies that realize at least 55% of their turnover regarding the scope of activity provided by the EU regulation, mostly mining, refining of petrol and petrol activity. And the basis of this contribution and the contribution is due when the taxable profit for 2022 exceed 120% of the average taxable profit realized by the same entity during the 4 financial years. So when you have an increase of your basis. And this contribution is equal to 33% of this basis. And one main point is that this contribution is not tax deductible. And for the time being in France, this contribution has been only introduced for 2022 and not for 2023, as it is provided by the EU regulation.
Yeah, and the level of taxation or the profit the French government expected from this contribution is not the one they would receive at the end, because we had many discussions regarding with French big company. I will not mention this company, but I think you perfectly know who I'm talking about. Is saying today that it would not be what has been expected regarding this contribution because of the way it has been voted at the end. Regarding, maybe we can go further regarding electricity, maybe?
Yes. No, so we have the introduction also by the financial bill as regards the cap on market revenue, windfall contribution. In order to be subject to this contribution, the French entity should meet 3 cumulative conditions. First, it only concerns installation located in metropolitan France. The electricity is not produced by certain technology announced by the law. Third condition is that the installation is not an electricity storage unit. And the fourth condition is the installation is not supplying electricity to small electricity network. Even if you meet these 4 conditions, the installation will not be subject to the windfall contribution if the total capacity of the power plant does not exceed 1 megawatt.
Yeah, it's the same. This 1 megawatt is the same for electricity tax. You don't pay any electricity tax if you produce lower than that threshold.
So this
windfall tax also is based on the market income, and not to enter into detail, but it includes all the revenue resulting from electricity sale on the market, and also derivatives or all the financial instruments resulting from the or relating to the electricity. We have some exemptions, not only all the revenue resulting from specific agreements signed with EDF, notably for purchase obligation, PPA, or complementary remuneration that has been concluded with EDF, notably for the renewable energy sector.
And just to provide you with an example of all the parliamentary debates we would have on that tax contribution, if I may, is around the exit from this purchase obligation revenue, because it has been very discussed before the parliament and by the French ministers on that, notably French Minister Attal, which is in charge of the budget, because of the fact that there is many exits from this contract, long-term agreement for purchase electricity obligation with tariff, because of the fact that it has been, let's say, a way for the French government saying that we are financing in the past the fact that we bought the electricity higher than the price, just to provide you the investment payment and so on, and at the time you would do some revenue. Let's say you exit from this contract and you go onto the market. It was very, very strange and very funny, but the contract we saw onto the French market, you don't have any indemnity at the end to exit from the contract. So we have many discussions before the French Constitutional Court saying that, or Council, sorry, saying that indeed it is the liberty of the parties into an agreement to decide whether or not they remain into the contract. But a lot of companies exit in April from the contract just to go onto the market and sell the electricity higher than the price they would expect if they remain in the contract with purchase obligation. And that's why we have many discussions on that with, let's say, a way for the government to justify the fact, and it could be the following part we discuss about, threshold lower than 180, because we would see regarding the production plants we would have, wind farm, nuclear, and so on, we will not have this level, and we have some also discussion regarding waste burning installation onto the French market with the 60 euros, which was onto the newspaper. But just to provide you a global picture on that, it has been said that it is a way for the French government to oblige this opportunity contract reaction we would have onto the French market to come back to what has been the price. And it has been a surprise, to be honest, for many operators onto the French market, because big players they exit from that, and they have been very disappointed when the tax came back with retroactivity, because we will discuss also about the timing on that. But as we have in some other countries, of Belgium, I would assume, we would have a retroactive effect in July 2022 for that taxation.
Okay, so the basis of the tax is that it is a difference between the market revenue and the threshold, and the threshold, and as it is mentioned, is depending on the technology. And after, we have a taxation of 90% of this margin, because we have an application of a 10% decrease. So we have mentioned the different threshold applicable depending on the technology. So for the payment of the tax, so we have 3 periods of taxation: July 1st, 2022 to November 3rd, 2022, and we have the second period, 1st December 2022 to June 3rd, 2023, and the last period is July 1 to December 31. And for the time being, only the first period of taxation has to be paid in 2033 in July. It is the first.
In 5 days.
In 5 days. It is precisely Monday or Tuesday, depending of the date of filing of the VAT return, because this tax is collected and paid the same time that VAT. So it is next week. And after, for the second and the third period of taxation, there is an installment of this tax to be paid on October of this year. So you will have to pay an installment representing 80% of the tax due.
What about the threshold? Delphine, we would have the discussion about it maybe just before. Yeah, the basis and the threshold. The threshold, you have mentioned it just before or not? I would assume that.
Yeah, I mentioned it is depending on the technology, and it is some of the threshold and most of the threshold are below the one provided by the EU regulation.
Yeah, we have the possibility into the text to increase the 10% allowance as a reduction between the rate and the 10%. Depending on certain criteria, but as a surprise, it has not been pointed out in the decree, because we normally have expected this information into the decree at the end of June, but we don't have it. It's just because we have also current discussion with the French Association and the French government onto the way of calculation the charges we would have. For some contracts, we would have some indemnity for the companies with a contract of obligation purchase of electricity. You would have sometimes indemnity. The question about indemnity is indemnity could be considered as lowering the revenue or not? It is something under discussion. What we don't have, compared to what we heard about our colleagues, we don't have any investment discussion around that. It is not part of the text. It is not part of the rule. It is not part of anything regarding the contribution. To be honest with you, I am pretty sure that next week some company that are liable to this contribution would not be able to pay, just because they don't know what they have to declare, because we have many questions remaining and we don't have all the answer. Sometimes it's because they don't want to see the answer they have received from the French tax administration. It is a part of the answer, but also we have some discussion because of the public bodies. Indeed, many electricity producers concerned by this tax are under contract with public bodies, and normally the indemnity or the revenue you would give by the contract of delegation of public services you would give to this public body normally are considered as decreasing your revenue. But it really depends on the contract of delegation you would have with this public body. And that's why we are on the discussion about the terms of the contract with the French tax administration. So many discussion, many things, and possible contestation of the windfall contribution. We have two discussions today, or we have one or two disputes. Not current. Yeah, we have one dispute, not us, but the market. One big dispute for a big association, a French association, and one dispute under discussion into the federation on that. We have some discussion before the constitutional council, but without success. But today we have two disputes, current dispute regarding the time. I'm not sure that, to be honest, that we would have any chance for the association to win onto the period of taxation, which is mainly onto the retroactivity effect of the tax. To be honest, it has been discussed before the Constitutional Council, and it has not been very successful. And the arguments from this association were not very consistent, to be honest. I hope we don't have any people from the tax administration, French tax administration on the phone. And the threshold that could be considered that are below the 180, plus the 10% if eligible. They would consider that, and I'm not sure, to be totally frank with you, to understand how it has been supported before the administration and tomorrow the court. It is regarding let's say something which creates some discrepancies between the operator, and it could have an effect onto the internal market. But to be honest, I think it's more than a litany of all the EU arguments you could find to fight this contribution. But we are not totally convinced, to be clear on that, about the potential success of such an action before the French court. So maybe you could have any question or thing like that around the French side of the moon?
Thank you, Stéphane. That was impressive. And once again, I noticed the link between the second contestation, the second possible argument against the French tax that you just mentioned, and Stefano's case, the one that came out today on the Italian news regarding this referral to the European Court of Justice, precisely because of the Italian cap being below the 180 euros set by the EU regulation. And the argument also around the fact that the Italian levy was introduced before the EU regulation came in. So one useful insight, once again, from the comparison of two different legal systems.
Yeah. And we have another potential case law, and it takes time, but I would say I know the lawyer in charge of it, and I would say that it could be very interesting to see the strategy, the legal strategy would use for fighting this contribution, because it's a former judge of the High Court for administrative purposes in France, and it is someone very, very technical and clever. I don't say that it was not the case for the other part of this case, but I think he knows very well the energy world, because the difficulty with that we have onto the French market, it's taxation, but also you have to be very, very clever onto the energy field. And that's why, to be honest with you, regarding the French Association about tax advisor, it has taken many times to find someone who wants to discuss about it, because of the technicity and the difficulty we have to understand the French regime of that tax.
Yeah, you need mixed knowledge between taxation and energy.
Yeah, and to be honest, it has been written in 2 weeks, this amendment, and obviously we continue to discuss. I speak about the French part, and we continue to discuss many words about Article 54 of the tax bill, because of the fact it's long. And each word is very important, and each one has to be discussed. So that's why I have said that the 25th of July, I'm not sure that all the operators liable to the tax would pay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Stéphane. So I would leave the floor to any comments, suggestions, questions from the participants, and also mention that anyone willing to access to the presentations, to the working papers that we have prepared, should simply drop an email to Mr. Gianni, and we will forward very gladly the materials, and be ready to receive comments and suggestions even in the coming days. Also, in sight of the next events we will organize when the cases are decided throughout the continent. So is there any question? Yes, Serena Cavaliere, please.
Hi, this is Serena Cavaliere from ERG. I just a very quick background of me. I work within the regulatory department of ERG. ERG as an independent power producer. So I'm the head of renewable regulation and market analysis with an engineering background. So I thank you to have accepted me, even though I am not a lawyer or a tax worker, but the company for which I'm working for has a broadly experience in all the markets that you have very well analyzed. So because we work both in Italy, in France, we have plans, renewable plans, both in Italy, in France, Spanish and UK markets. So I agreed with all of you and really thank because all of your contribution have been provided a very exhaustive outlook of the different measures. And I want to add that the regulatory the regulation, the European regulation ruling the extraordinary measures, especially those which affect the inframarginal producers, are created general confusions into the electricity producers. And because the calculation methods are very different between each countries, the payment deadlines are really different and vary from country to country. I want to point out that in France, the latest deadline will be the 21st of July, but depending on the VAT regime, many producers have already paid the first payment, and the first payment, the one who refers to the past figures, the one who refers to the period covering July 2022 to the end of November 2022.
It depends on your VAT regime.
Yes, for the normal VAT regime,
right,
the payment was already executed 2 days ago, and I want to point out that it is a final payment, meaning that it will be difficult in the future to rule against, I don't know, to debate against the payment already made, and because I agree that until the end of June, when a specific decree that ruled the timing and the deadline for payment, calculation method was still uncertain. So I just want to point out that first of all, a cumulative, I mean, a jointly activity to recourse against this type of extraordinary measure could be useful, and any kind of experience that may arise from the different countries may be useful to be shared. Therefore, I can provide my experience of the company, of the experience of my company, as I will also appreciate if all of you can share the respective experience. That's all. I don't want to deep into the specific calculation methods because, believe me, I took more about 1 year, the latest year in understanding different rules, and believe me, it's a mess. So, but thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Serena. Your colleague Lorenzo Cella in the previous edition of the webinar very well explained some of the puzzling issues and headaches he had to face in the calculations and in complying with the specific features of the 2022 tax, and inclusive of the original inclusion of the sale of shares within the taxable base, which was then cut out of the statute with the budget law. Thank you for your intervention. Stefan, you wanted to add something. I'm sorry, I spoke over you.
Yeah, no. It's true that it is under VAT. I would say that many of our clients, just for you to know, have decided to wait for the 2025 to pay. You're right. We say that it is the VAT regime. So normally you would have to pay before the 2025, but I would not say the big player, but many big companies with some electricity production in their plants, they have never declared, and they would begin to declare the 2025 next week. That's why we said that, just to be clear on that. And regarding the refund, if we are not happy with the tax and the way it has been calculated, and I totally share with you about the fact that I am not an engineer. I am a poor lawyer, but I've tried to understand how it works practically regarding the discussion we get with the client. It's difficult, but it is not written in the text. I don't know where it is mentioned. Why do you mention that? But it is not written that you can't claim a refund if you make a mistake or if you are not happy with the text. Because it's normally regulated by the normal VAT rules on the refund. I would double check that point, but I think you have the possibility to reclaim after if you are not happy with that. But again, what is true is it's so difficult to calculate and so difficult to discuss that calculation that maybe it would kill any willing to discuss after the payment the refund. And many thanks for helping us with your company.
Thank you.
And
so, is there any other comment? Alessandro, you wanted to say something about the difficulties of making the calculations across the countries. I guess you have some experience with Enel.
No, I prefer not to comment on this. I can use just bad words. But no, what I found interesting is that probably looking at the way the different countries, EU, but also UK, have implemented, let's say, the law, it might be interesting, let's say, analyzing it and even putting some elements into potential litigation, in the sense that the idea of the EU regulation was to have something which was, let's say, coherent, just to have, let's say, an approach and have some uniformity at European level. And we see that each country has implemented in a different way, some correcting, let's say, correcting errors, which we have, for example, in Italy or in Spain. So I found it interesting this benchmarking among at least the EU implementation. We might use it in the litigation probably.
So thank you, everyone.
Paolo, if I may only to specify my idea, I think that the main problem, the main concern is about the fact that there is too much confusion about the concept, because I noticed that also in other countries there is a great overlapping between revenues, extra margin, extra profits, deductibility or not deductibility. This creates a great confusion about it. So I think that the target, the aim to collect something that is requested by this very peculiar situation may be accepted also by the producer, I think. But the mix up of all these things is too heavy that cannot be tolerated. This confusion between different concepts like revenue, profits, income, and so on. Mixing up also different fields in which the producer sometimes are involved. So this is the main, I think, the main concern.
Thank you. And you know what the result finally may be of this webinar of ours at ICC? I think we should really keep up analyzing across the countries and perhaps making up an international working group for ICC. We will speak about this with Ms. Scarcella, coordinating the various countries, because as Alessandro just said, the inter-country comparison might result very interesting. And I mean, the intervention of the EU, criticizable as it is on one hand for using Article 122, and we will see what the ECJ has to say about that. But I mean, it finally brought in some consistency, at least among the countries, because otherwise we would see Greece, for example, introducing a 90% tax rate, the Spaniards extending the levy to the financial sector, Italians doing it with VAT settlements, and what the cap would be. Would it be 58 euros in Sicily, Lombardy, or what about Bourgogne in France? Yeah, so thank you very much. That was very interesting indeed. Thank you for participating, and I think we will meet again soon over these webinars. Thank you.